Why people never really see you. Most people spend years trying to explain themselves to others who have already decided who they are, and the unsettling part is that they never notice it happening. They assume communication has failed. They think they used the wrong words, and that if they could only speak more clearly, act more carefully, or become more agreeable, someone would finally understand them. But Carl Jung understood something darker about human nature. People rarely see you as you are. They see you as their mind allows you to exist. The moment you realize this, your relationship with people begins to change, because you notice something unsettling. Every social interaction contains two realities. The first is who you truly are. The second is the psychological role people unconsciously assign to you. Most people spend their entire lives trapped inside roles they never chose. The good son, the quiet friend, the funny one, the sensitive girl, the loser, the responsible one. Once a group decides your identity, every action you take gets filtered through that version of you. Even your growth becomes suspicious to them, especially your growth, because people feel comfortable when your identity remains predictable, and predictability keeps the social hierarchy stable. The moment you evolve beyond the role they assigned you, tension begins. You see it in small things first. You become more confident, and suddenly people call you arrogant. You stop over-explaining yourself, and people accuse you of being cold. You set boundaries, and others quietly begin withdrawing from you, not because you became worse, but because the version of you they benefited from is disappearing. People don't resent your weakness, they resent the possibility that you might outgrow them. Projection. Interacting with a version of you young, believed that human beings are constantly projecting unconscious material onto others. This means most people aren't actually interacting with you, they're interacting with their interpretation of you. Their fears, their insecurities, their unmet desires, their private frustrations. Once you see this clearly, certain memories start rearranging themselves in your mind. You remember moments where people misread intentions you thought were obvious kindness, interpreted as weakness, silence mistaken for insecurity, ambition mistaken for selfishness. You begin to realize something deeply uncomfortable. Being understood was never fully under your control. Because understanding requires self-awareness, and most people aren't self-aware enough to see past their own projections. That's why some people punish you for changing, not openly, but psychologically and subtly. Their energy shifts, their tone changes, their support disappears the moment you stop fitting the character they created for you. And strangely, the more authentic you become, the fewer people feel comfortable around you, because authenticity disrupts social illusions. The unspoken contract. Most relationships are built on mutual psychological agreements nobody talks about. I will continue being who you expect me to be if you do the same for me. The moment one person breaks that contract, discomfort begins. This is why so many people feel exhausted after social interactions, without understanding why. They think they're tired from talking, but they're actually tired from performing, tired from managing reactions, tired from adjusting their personality depending on who's in front of them, tired from carrying versions of themselves that no longer feel real. Over time, something dangerous happens. The false self becomes more socially rewarded than the authentic one. Jung pointed to this indirectly through the concept of the persona, the mask developed to survive society. At first, the mask protects you. Then it imprisons you, because the more approval you receive for playing the role, the harder it becomes to abandon it. The nice person becomes unable to express anger. The strong person becomes unable to admit pain. The intelligent person becomes terrified of looking ignorant. Eventually, people no longer relate to each other honestly, they relate to masks, negotiating with masks. That's why so many conversations feel empty, Even when words are exchanged for hours, very little truth is actually present. Most people are strategically presenting acceptable fragments of themselves, while hiding anything that might threaten social acceptance. The tragedy is that they often do this for so long, they forget who they were before the performance started. You can see it in nearly every social environment: schools, families, friend groups, workplaces. Every system quietly rewards predictability. The person who behaves consistently is easier to categorize, and categorized people are easier to control. The moment someone changes unexpectedly, anxiety spreads through the group because transformation destabilizes the unconscious social order. When confidence makes people uncomfortable, think about how uncomfortable people become when someone suddenly gains real confidence, not performative confidence. The quiet person starts speaking directly. The insecure person stops seeking validation. The people pleaser learns to say no. Suddenly the environment reacts strangely, not always with hostility, but sometimes with jokes, distance, passive aggression, or subtle exclusion, because human beings unconsciously pressure each other to remain psychologically familiar. Kindness without boundaries quietly teaches people how to use you. Most people never realize how much of their personality was socially engineered through reward and punishment. As children, approval shaped their behavior: smile more, be polite, don't speak too loudly, don't upset others, don't be difficult. Eventually, survival becomes tied to being accepted, and the mind develops a quiet, terrifying equation: if misunderstanding risks rejection, then authenticity becomes dangerous. This is where many people split internally. One self becomes visible, the other gets buried underground. But buried doesn't mean dead. Jung called this buried part the shadow, and the shadow doesn't disappear just because you ignore it. It waits inside resentment, inside sudden anger, inside fantasies you never admit aloud, inside exhaustion that makes no logical sense. The more someone suppresses their authentic impulses for the sake of acceptance, the heavier the shadow becomes, until eventually they no longer know whether people love them, or merely love the easy-to-digest version of them that remains. A different kind of loneliness. That realization changes a person. Once you see it, you begin questioning every relationship differently. Who actually understands you, and who only understands the role you learn to perform for survival? At some point, a strange loneliness appears, not the loneliness of being alone, but the loneliness of being unseen. You can sit in a room full of people who laugh with you, speak with you, and spend years around you, and still feel psychologically invisible, because deep down you know they're interacting with a carefully edited version of you, not the real thing. What makes this so isolating is that they may genuinely believe they know you. Most misunderstandings aren't accidental, they're structural. Human beings simplify each other to reduce psychological complexity, and your mind does the same. The brain creates compressed identities because fully understanding another person requires enormous emotional energy. So instead, people create symbols. He's insecure. She's difficult. He's successful. She's emotional. Once the label forms, the mind filters reality through it. Evidence supporting the label gets remembered. Evidence contradicting it gets ignored. This is why changing someone's perception of you feels almost impossible. You're not fighting their opinion, you're fighting the stability of their internal world. Because if they misjudged you, they have to confront the possibility that they misjudge others too, maybe even themselves. Most people avoid that realization at all costs. It's psychologically safer to reduce someone to a fixed identity than to accept human complexity. What irritates us reveals us. This is where Jung becomes unsettling, because he believed that what irritates us most in others often reveals disowned parts of ourselves. The arrogant person triggers hidden insecurity. The confident person exposes buried self-hatred. The free person reminds others of the prison they emotionally accepted years ago. This is why authenticity creates tension, not because authenticity is offensive, but because it unconsciously confronts people with the parts of themselves they abandoned. People who suppress anger resent direct people. People who sacrificed their dreams resent independent people. People who built their identity around social approval secretly fear those who no longer need it. Most relationships don't end when respect disappears, they end when awareness appears. Once you notice these patterns, social interactions start to feel different. You hear things beneath the words, a compliment that sounds slightly threatened, concern that feels more like control, advice designed to keep you psychologically small. You realize how much of human communication is really unconscious negotiation. People constantly test each other's boundaries, status, confidence, and emotional dependence without even realizing it. Who apologizes first? Who seeks approval? Who tolerates disrespect? Who over-explains themselves? These small interactions silently determine the power dynamics inside relationships. The person constantly trying to be understood often loses psychological leverage first, because excessive explanation communicates something beneath the words, "Please validate my reality." Manipulative people sense this immediately. They learn that confusion weakens you, that withholding understanding gives them control, and that if they keep questioning your intentions long enough, you'll eventually start questioning yourself. This is why some people leave conversations feeling strangely guilty. Even when they did nothing wrong, their nervous system was pulled into defending an identity that was never being fairly examined to begin with. The more emotionally dependent someone becomes on being understood, the easier they are to psychologically destabilize. Choosing not to explain. There comes a moment in some people's lives when they quietly stop explaining themselves, not out of anger, but out of recognition. They realize that constant self-justification is often a form of unconscious begging to be seen correctly, interpreted fairly, allowed to exist inside someone else's mind without distortion. But human beings are not neutral observers. They see through wounds, ego, fear, envy, and desire. Even love can distort perception, especially love, because the people closest to you are often the most invested in the version of you that keeps their emotional world stable. A mother may unconsciously resist her son becoming independent because his dependence gave her identity meaning. A friend may discourage your growth because your old insecurity made them feel superior. A partner may claim they want honesty until your honesty threatens the dynamic they emotionally relied on. People rarely realize how much attachment shapes perception. Most aren't seeing reality clearly enough for that. They're seeing emotional utility: who comforts them, who validates them, who threatens them, who reminds them of their own inadequacy. And once you understand this, another realization emerges. Many people never wanted the real you. They wanted predictable access to the emotional role you provided: the listener, the rescuer, the entertainer, the obedient one, the damaged one. When that role disappears, their connection to you weakens, not because you betrayed them, but because the unconscious transaction ended. This is why growth often feels lonelier than suffering. Suffering keeps relationships familiar. Growth changes the structure, and people become uncomfortable when they can no longer emotionally place you where you used to be. Notice how quickly others question your transformation. You've changed, almost always said with subtle disappointment. But change is the most natural thing about human existence. What people truly mean is, "You no longer behave in ways that make me comfortable." That sentence alone explains countless broken friendships, relationships, and family tensions. The Privilege and Cost of Becoming Yourself. Carl Jung once wrote that the privilege of a lifetime is becoming who you truly are. But he also understood the hidden cost attached to that privilege. Becoming yourself disturbs people, because authenticity forces others to confront their own masks. A person who abandoned their dreams feels uneasy around someone pursuing theirs relentlessly. A person trapped in people-pleasing feels irritated by boundaries. A person emotionally dependent on external validation secretly fears those who can walk alone. Freedom exposes captivity, and human beings unconsciously resent reminders of prisons they chose voluntarily. This is why some people subtly attack individuality while pretending to care about you. Be realistic. Don't change too much. You're overthinking. You used to be different. These words sound harmless, but beneath them is often unconscious fear, because your transformation threatens the psychological agreements surrounding your old identity. The darker truth is this: some people will only support your growth as long as it doesn't surpass theirs. The moment your confidence becomes undeniable, their warmth changes temperature, not always consciously. That's what makes it dangerous. Human beings can sabotage others while genuinely believing they're helping them. Discernment, not endless defense. Once you fully understand this, your relationship with conflict changes forever. You stop assuming every misunderstanding can be solved through better communication, because some people misunderstand you strategically, others misunderstand you emotionally, and many misunderstand you because truly seeing you would force them to question themselves. That's the part most people avoid confronting. Understanding another human being requires the death of certain illusions. It demands flexibility, humility, self-awareness. But the ego prefers certainty, because certainty feels safe. So instead of asking, "Who is this person really?" most people unconsciously ask, "How does this person fit into my existing worldview?" The difference is enormous. One seeks truth, the other seeks psychological comfort. And psychological comfort almost always wins. This is why people grow uncomfortable when someone refuses to defend themselves. Endlessly silence disrupts expectation. When you stop over-explaining, people lose access to your emotional center. They can no longer easily manipulate your need for validation. And strangely, this often angers them more than the original disagreement itself. A person arguing with you may not even care about the issue anymore. They care about control over perception. They want emotional confirmation that their interpretation of you remains dominant. That's why certain people become frustrated when you calmly accept being misunderstood. Your refusal to panic removes their psychological leverage. The world quietly trains people to believe they must constantly explain their humanity. Explain why they deserve respect. Explain why they feel hurt. Explain why they need space. Explain why they changed. But there's a hidden violence in perpetual self-explanation. Over time, it teaches the mind that your internal reality requires external permission to become valid. And once someone depends on outside understanding to feel psychologically stable, they become fragile. One accusation can shake them. One rejection can distort their identity. One misunderstanding can consume their thoughts for days, because their sense of self exists inside other people's perception. Individuation, becoming whole. This is why Jung emphasized individuation, the process of becoming psychologically whole, apart from collective expectation. Not socially approved, whole. There's a difference. Social approval is conditional. Wholeness is internal. The person seeking approval constantly scans the environment. Do they like me? Did I say something wrong? Am I accepted here? The individuated person asks different questions entirely. Am I betraying myself to maintain comfort? What parts of me only exist for survival? What truth have I been avoiding because acceptance felt safer? Those questions change a person, painfully. because eventually you start noticing how often your personality shifts depending on who you're around. A different laugh, a different tone, different opinions, different emotional intensity. Then the terrifying thought arrives: if your identity changes in every room, which version is actually you? Most people avoid this question forever. They continue adapting automatically until adaptation becomes identity itself. But beneath all the social performance, the psyche remembers the anger you swallowed, the opinions you silenced, the ambition you downplayed so others wouldn't feel threatened. The shadow remembers everything, and eventually suppressed authenticity transforms into quiet resentment toward life itself, not because life betrayed you, but because you betrayed yourself repeatedly for the sake of belonging. The quiet cost of self-betrayal. The frightening thing about self-betrayal is that it rarely feels dramatic while it's happening. It feels practical: small compromises, small silences, small performances. You laugh when something bothers you. You stay quiet to avoid tension. You soften your personality so others feel comfortable around you. At first it seems harmless, but years later, many people wake up with a strange emptiness. They can't explain a feeling that their life somehow belongs to someone else. Every suppressed instinct leaves psychological residue. The body remembers what the mouth never said, and eventually the mind begins turning against itself. Anxiety, resentment, emotional numbness, sudden exhaustion around certain people. These aren't random emotions, they're signals from the psyche, warning you that too much of your existence has become artificial. This is why some people feel deeply tired around specific social groups, but strangely alive when alone. Solitude removes the performance. For a brief moment, they no longer have to manage perception, no monitoring facial expressions, no calculating responses, no shaping themselves into something digestible. Just silence. And in that silence, the buried self slowly begins resurfacing. That's why many people fear being alone, not because solitude is painful, but because silence exposes unresolved truth. A distracted mind can avoid itself indefinitely. A silent mind cannot. Jung believed that until the unconscious becomes conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. This is exactly what happens in social life. People unknowingly repeat patterns for decades because they never examine the unconscious fears controlling them: the fear of rejection, the fear of abandonment, the fear of becoming unlikable, the fear of outgrowing others, the fear of being seen too clearly. That last one matters most, because many people claim they want to be understood, while secretly fearing what authentic visibility would actually cost them. Real visibility changes everything. Real visibility changes relationships. Once you stop performing weakness, certain people disappear. Once you stop seeking approval, some dynamics lose their power entirely. Once you stop over-explaining, manipulative individuals become exposed almost immediately. Because healthy people don't need you to constantly defend your reality. Only controlling people benefit from your confusion. Once you recognize this, something cold begins forming inside you, not hatred, but discernment. You start noticing how many interactions are built on subtle emotional dependence. How many people only feel secure when you remain uncertain about yourself. How often guilt is used as invisible social control. How frequently society rewards compliance disguised as kindness. The obedient are called good. The self-abandoning are called caring. The exhausted are called dependable. Meanwhile, the person developing boundaries gets labeled selfish, because boundaries interrupt access. People often confuse love with access to your energy, but access is not love. Control is not love. Possession is not love. Many relationships survive only because one person lacks the courage to become themselves fully. realizing that alone can dismantle entire social worlds. Because once authenticity enters a relationship, illusion begins dying and illusion fights for survival aggressively. Most people don't consciously lie about who they are. They simply become addicted to the version of themselves that meets the least resistance from the world. After enough years pass, they mistake adaptation for identity. But deep down, something inside them always knows the shadow always knows, and eventually, every unlived truth returns as suffering. The crossroads, being understood, or being real eventually. A person reaches a crossroads most never speak about openly, continue being understood, or become real, because the two often start separating the moment transformation begins. The authentic self is unpredictable, complicated, contradictory. Society prefers simpler characters, easy people, readable people, manageable people. That's why the world rewards consistency, even when that consistency is false. A person who constantly performs agreeableness is considered mature. A person who quietly suppresses resentment is considered peaceful. A person who never confronts others is considered kind. But beneath many socially acceptable personalities lies accumulated emotional decay, and the longer someone avoids confronting it, the more disconnected they become from themselves. This is why certain people explode after years of silence, years of adaptation collapsing at once, as the shadow finally forces itself into consciousness. Jung understood that whatever remains unconscious doesn't disappear. It accumulates pressure like water behind a dam, and one day, the structure cracks. The terrifying part is that many people never realize how much of their life was built around avoiding disapproval. Even their dreams become edited. They choose careers others respect, relationships others approve of, opinions that keep social harmony intact, not because those choices are authentic, but because rejection felt psychologically unbearable.